Johnny Lewis, a rising star from Sons of Anarchy, shocked Hollywood when he brutally killed his landlady and fell to his death the same day. What led to this tragic and violent end? Today, we uncover the disturbing truth behind the headlines. Before we dive in, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime cases like this one. Johnny Lewis was born Jonathan Kendrick Lewis on October 29, 1983, in Los Angeles, California. Raised in a family deeply rooted in the entertainment industry, Lewis seemed destined for a career in show business from a young age. His father, Michael Lewis, was a well-known writer in Scientology circles, while his mother, Devona Lewis, supported the family's spiritual lifestyle, which was heavily influenced by the Church of Scientology. Johnny was homeschooled and grew up in a relatively stable environment, surrounded by the arts and creativity. His early exposure to acting set the stage for what seemed like a promising career. Lewis began his acting career in his teenage years, quickly gaining attention for his talent. In 2000, at the age of 17, he landed his first significant television role in the series Seventh Heaven. This role marked the start of a steady rise in Hollywood, as he continued to book parts in popular TV shows such as Malcolm in the Middle, Boston Public, and The Guardian. His youthful looks and strong performances made him a go-to for guest appearances on various shows aimed at younger audiences. His big break came in 2005 when he was cast as Dennis "Chili" Childress in the hit Fox teen drama. The O.C., the show's massive popularity exposed him to a wider audience, and Lewis was quickly seen as an up-and-coming actor with a bright future. Shortly after, in 2008, he landed a prominent role in Sons of Anarchy, where he played Kip Halfsack Epps, a prospect for the outlaw motorcycle club at the center of the show. His performance as the somewhat naive but well-meaning character was well received, and his career appeared to be on the rise. However, behind the scenes, Johnny Lewis's life was beginning to take a darker turn. Despite his growing success in Hollywood, there were signs of instability emerging in his personal life. By 2009, rumors of erratic behavior and struggles with mental health began to surface. Friends and colleagues noticed that Lewis's demeanor had changed. His relationships became strained, and his once promising career started to stall. While it's difficult to pinpoint when his mental health issues first began, some sources have speculated that his upbringing in the Church of Scientology may have influenced his reluctance to seek proper treatment. Others suggest that the pressures of fame and the fast-paced lifestyle of Hollywood contributed to his growing instability. Lewis reportedly struggled with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, though it's unclear if he was ever officially diagnosed. What is known is that his mental health rapidly declined in the years following his departure from Sons of Anarchy in 2009. Despite these issues, Lewis continued to work sporadically in the industry. He appeared in films like The Runaways and Lovely Molly, but his career never quite reached the heights it once seemed destined for. By 2011, his personal life had become increasingly chaotic. He was involved in several violent altercations and had multiple run-ins with the law. In January 2012, he was arrested after breaking into a woman's home and assaulting her. This incident marked the beginning of a series of legal troubles that would culminate in the tragic events of September 26, 2012. Signs of Johnny Lewis's mental instability became more apparent in the years following his rise to fame. By 2009, while still working on Sons of Anarchy, his behavior reportedly began to change. Friends, colleagues, and those who interacted with him noticed an increasing unpredictability in his actions. He became more erratic and impulsive, exhibiting signs that something was seriously wrong. While Hollywood is often a high-pressure environment, the severity of Lewis's mental health issues seemed to go beyond the typical stress associated with the entertainment industry. One of the first significant legal incidents occurred in January 2012, when Lewis broke into the home of a woman in Santa Monica. The woman was not home at the time, but Lewis reportedly ransacked the house, leaving it in disarray. When the woman returned, she confronted Lewis and the situation turned violent. He assaulted her, and the attack left her with injuries serious enough to require medical attention. Lewis fled the scene but was later apprehended by police and charged with burglary and assault. This event marked a critical turning point in his legal troubles, as it became clear that his actions were not simply impulsive but deeply concerning. Following the burglary and assault, Lewis was arrested and held in jail. He was subsequently ordered to attend court-mandated rehabilitation and anger management programs. While these measures may have been intended to address some of his issues, they did not seem to provide a long-term solution. After his release from jail, Lewis's behavior continued to escalate, and he was involved in further violent encounters in the months that followed. In February 2012, only a month after the burglary, Lewis was arrested again, this time for assault with a deadly weapon. He had reportedly gotten into a physical altercation with two men, during which he used a bottle to strike one of them. The attack was sudden and violent, and bystanders at the scene described Lewis as agitated and aggressive. Once again, police were called, and Lewis was taken into custody. He faced charges of assault with a deadly weapon, a serious offense that could have resulted in a lengthy prison sentence had he been convicted. However, in this case, he was released on bail and continued to await trial for his earlier and more recent crimes. These violent outbursts had a significant impact on Lewis's personal life and career. His reputation in Hollywood began to suffer as news of his legal troubles spread. For an actor who had once been seen as a rising star with a promising future, the mounting criminal charges signaled the rapid decline of his career. He had already left Sons of Anarchy by this point, and it became increasingly difficult for him to secure new acting roles. The combination of legal issues, erratic behavior, and rumors about his deteriorating mental health effectively sidelined his career. Friends and former colleagues noticed that he had become more isolated, withdrawn, and volatile, leading many to distance themselves from him. Lewis's legal problems were not limited to violent confrontations. He was also charged with resisting arrest on several occasions. One such incident occurred during his February 2012 arrest for assault, when he struggled with officers and refused to comply with their commands. His resistance only added to his growing list of charges and further strained his already troubled relationship with law enforcement. The criminal charges, coupled with his unstable behavior, had a profound effect on his relationships. Johnny Lewis had previously been in a high-profile relationship with actress Katy Perry, but by the time his legal issues became serious, the two had already broken up. His personal life became increasingly tumultuous, and it is believed that many of his friendships and professional relationships suffered as a result of his actions. Some friends later reported that they had tried to reach out to him, but Lewis had grown increasingly difficult to communicate with and seemed unwilling to seek help. The people in his life were left unsure of how to intervene as his mental and legal troubles compounded. Despite his escalating criminal behavior, it appears that Lewis never received the level of intervention that his situation required. His legal troubles were treated on a case-by-case basis, and though he faced rehabilitation programs and anger management courses, there was no sustained effort to address the root causes of his violent and erratic actions, namely, his mental health struggles. Johnny Lewis had been living in a guest house owned by Catherine Davis, located on the 3600 block of Waverly Drive. Davis, a well-respected and kind woman, was known for renting out rooms in her large home to actors and writers trying to make their way in Hollywood. Johnny Lewis was one such tenant, having lived in the property for a few months as he tried to regain some stability in his life following his numerous run-ins with the law and battles with mental health. Davis, who was fond of the people she rented to, had no reason to suspect that allowing Lewis to stay in her home would ultimately lead to her tragic death. The exact timeline of events that day remains somewhat unclear, but investigators were able to piece together a chilling narrative based on evidence and witness statements. Sometime in the early afternoon, Lewis launched a violent attack on Catherine Davis inside her home. The attack was brutal and unprovoked. According to forensic reports, Davis was beaten severely, suffering blunt force trauma to the head and upper body. It is unclear if any weapon was used in the attack, but the extent of her injuries suggested a prolonged and violent struggle. During the attack, Lewis also killed Davis's pet cat. Reports indicate that the cat had been either bludgeoned or strangled, its body found near Davis's in the home. The killing of the cat added another layer of disturbing cruelty to an already horrific crime, indicating the extreme level of violence Lewis exhibited that day. As the attack unfolded, neighbors began to hear commotion coming from the property. Several residents later reported hearing screams and loud crashing sounds coming from Davis's home. One neighbor described hearing a woman's desperate cries for help, followed by a loud thud. Concerned by the noises, a few neighbors went outside to investigate and soon witnessed Johnny Lewis acting erratically. He was seen climbing the outside walls of the property, pacing back and forth on the rooftop and shouting incoherently. It was clear to those who saw him that he was in a state of extreme agitation, behaving in a way that suggested he was either hallucinating or experiencing a psychotic break. During this time, Lewis had a physical altercation with a neighbor and a handyman who had come to Davis's house to check on the situation. According to witnesses, Lewis jumped or fell from the roof onto the driveway, where he confronted the two men. He attacked them with an unusual level of aggression, throwing punches and fighting wildly. One of the men later reported that Lewis seemed to possess an almost superhuman strength during the fight, which led to initial speculation that drugs might have been involved. However, toxicology reports would later confirm that no drugs or alcohol were found in Lewis's system at the time of his death. Despite being physically overpowered by the men, Lewis managed to escape their grip and climb back onto the roof of the house. It was from this rooftop that he either fell or jumped to his death. Investigators were unable to determine whether the fall was intentional or accidental, but Lewis's body was discovered in the driveway below, where he had sustained fatal injuries from the impact. When police arrived on the scene, they found Johnny Lewis already dead in the driveway. Upon entering the home, they made the grim discovery of Catherine Davis's lifeless body inside, along with her pet cat. The violent nature of the crime, combined with Lewis's own sudden death, left investigators with many unanswered questions. It was clear that the events of the day had escalated rapidly, but the exact triggers for Lewis's violent outburst remain unknown. Witnesses who saw Lewis in the moments before his death were unanimous in describing his behavior as erratic and disturbed. He was reportedly shouting nonsensical things, gesturing wildly, and seemed completely disconnected from reality. Some neighbors initially thought that he was under the influence of drugs, while others speculated that he was having a mental health crisis. In the hours following the incident, news of Johnny Lewis's death and the murder of Catherine Davis began to spread, shocking both the neighborhood and the wider Hollywood community. Investigators quickly ruled out any external influences in Lewis's death, concluding that he had acted alone. The autopsy and toxicology reports confirmed that there were no drugs or alcohol in his system, further deepening the mystery of why he had snapped so violently that day. As police pieced together the events, it became increasingly clear that Lewis's mental health issues likely played a significant role in his actions. His erratic behavior leading up to the incident, combined with his history of legal troubles and violent outbursts, suggested that he may have been suffering from an untreated or undiagnosed mental health condition, possibly exacerbated by stress or other external factors. One of the key questions investigators faced was whether Lewis's fall was accidental or intentional. Given the erratic behavior he exhibited before his death, including scaling walls and pacing on the rooftop, it was difficult to determine his state of mind in those final moments. Witnesses reported seeing him moving around frantically on the roof, yelling incoherently and acting out of control. Some believe that in his disturbed mental state, he may have lost his balance and accidentally fallen while trying to escape or continue his rampage. The layout of the house with its steep, uneven roof made such an accident plausible. However, another theory is that Lewis intentionally jumped to his death. His mental health was clearly deteriorating, as seen through the brutal murder of Davis and his earlier physical altercation with a neighbor and a handyman. Some have speculated that in a moment of despair or extreme psychosis, he may have chosen to end his life by jumping from the roof. This theory is supported by the fact that he made no attempt to flee the scene after the murders, instead returning to the roof, where he ultimately fell to his death. The official forensic report did not provide a definitive answer as to whether the fall was accidental or a suicide. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma sustained from the fall, but investigators were unable to establish Lewis's intentions. No suicide note or clear indication of self-harm was found, leaving open the possibility of either scenario. Witnesses did not report seeing him leap off the roof, further complicating the question of whether his death was the result of an accident or an intentional act. In the immediate aftermath of Lewis's death, there was widespread speculation that drugs or alcohol might have played a role in his violent outburst and erratic behavior. Given his past legal troubles and known substance abuse issues, it seemed likely to some that he had been under the influence of drugs at the time of the murders. However, the toxicology report released after his death revealed no traces of drugs or alcohol in his system. This finding surprised many, as his behavior that day was consistent with someone in the midst of a drug-fueled episode. The toxicology report's results shifted the focus away from substance abuse and toward Lewis's mental health struggles. With no external substances influencing his actions, investigators and the public were left to grapple with the reality that Lewis's violent behavior may have stemmed entirely from his psychological condition. The absence of drugs or alcohol in his system confirmed that his erratic behavior and the violence that unfolded that day were likely driven by an untreated or poorly managed mental illness, possibly exacerbated by stress or other factors in his life. In the entertainment industry, reactions were a mix of shock and sadness. Many of Lewis's former colleagues from shows like Sons of Anarchy and The O.C. expressed their disbelief at the news. Kurt Sutter, the creator of Sons of Anarchy, made a public statement on Twitter shortly after the incident. Sutter acknowledged that Lewis had been deeply troubled, noting that everyone involved in the show had seen signs of his personal struggles. He expressed sorrow for the loss of both Lewis and Catherine Davis, while also reflecting on the tragic circumstances that led to the violent outcome. Other actors and colleagues who had worked with Lewis also shared their grief, describing him as a talented but troubled individual. Many commented on the apparent disconnect between the Johnny Lewis they knew, a charismatic, engaging actor, and the person who committed such a horrifying act. For those who had worked closely with him, the news was a reminder of how much his mental health had deteriorated in the years leading up to his death. The media coverage of the incident was extensive given Lewis's public profile and the shocking nature of the crime. Headlines focused on his role in Sons of Anarchy, often emphasizing the irony that an actor known for playing a character on the fringes of society had himself become the center of a violent real-life tragedy. News outlets recounted his past legal troubles, his history of violent behavior, and speculated on the causes of his breakdown. The details of the murder, including the brutal killing of Davis and her pet cat, added to the sensational nature of the coverage. The media also explored the possibility of drug involvement early on, given Lewis's erratic behavior and past issues with substance abuse. However, once the toxicology report confirmed that no drugs or alcohol were involved, the focus shifted to his mental health. Journalists began to dig deeper into his history, examining how his untreated or poorly managed mental health issues had contributed to his downfall. The fact that Lewis had suffered from potential mental health conditions like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia highlighted a broader societal issue: the intersection of mental illness and violent crime. Public reaction to the crime was a mixture of shock, sadness, and reflection. The brutal nature of the murder and the tragic end of a once promising actor left many questioning how someone like Johnny Lewis could have reached such a violent and desperate point. The case prompted discussions about the role of mental health in violent crimes and whether more could have been done to help Lewis before the situation spiraled out of control. Mental health advocates weighed in on the case, stressing the importance of early intervention and proper treatment for individuals struggling with severe psychological issues. Many pointed out that Lewis's repeated arrests, erratic behavior, and violent tendencies should have been clear warning signs of a deeper problem. The failure to address these issues effectively, either through the criminal justice system or through mental health services, raised concerns about how society handles individuals in crisis. In the weeks following the crime, there was a broader conversation about the stigmatization of mental illness in Hollywood and beyond. While many in the entertainment industry rallied around the importance of mental health awareness, there was also a sense of frustration that more had not been done to help Lewis before it was too late. His story became a tragic example of the consequences of untreated mental illness and the devastating impact it can have not only on the individual but on those around them. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into true crime stories. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Your support helps us bring you more content like this.